Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we are proudly presented by SPI Logistics. And we got a good show for you today. It's a very hot topic, a button issue, whatever you want to call it. We both have been attending several conferences over the last couple of months. So I think it's a good time to have a conversation about freight insurance, freight fraud, everything that's going on within the industry. And what better person to have that with than Jim, who is over at Loadsure, I believe COO and co-founder. So Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Blythe. Thanks for having me.
Now, I was reading through some of your bio on LinkedIn, and I just assumed you had always been in insurance, but you've been in freight for, you've definitely worked in the trenches here. For folks who may not be familiar with your background, how did you first get involved, and sort of how did your career evolve over the years?
It's actually a pretty interesting story. I had gotten out of the Marine Corps, and while I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed actually in Denver for a little over a year, and wanted to get back to Denver, and decided to pack up everything I owned when I got out, and did the drive out, and was hanging out in a bar of all places, as most people do, and met someone who worked for a small drayage and public warehousing company. We became friends. He got me a job there, and it just kind of took off from there. They did warehousing for the U.S. Mint here in Denver, bunch of public warehousing, everything from toilet paper to Ferraris, had a General Electric SDS contract and a few other retail delivery contracts. So I got to learn both the warehousing and the transportation side of the business working for them, and that business was acquired, or actually through a series of 7 or 8 acquisitions, became a part of DHL supply chain. And I grew as those acquisitions acquired through the ranks. My last role with them was managing third-party agents for home delivery. So on the final mile bit, if we didn't have enough critical mass volume, if you will, to support our own brick and mortar, we would contract with a moving and storage company or air freight company or something in that in the city, and I would be responsible for their performance operations, the commercial relationship, make sure they got paid, all of those fun things. And a colleague of mine went to become a CTO of a very large freight brokerage, and they were spinning out a digital freight brokerage, if you will, a freight marketplace, was 10-4 Systems. He recruited me to go over there. So I went to go work for 10-4, kind of running. I started out really as doing product, and ended up running sales and back office and legal and pretty much everything no one else wanted to do with the company. Did that for 4.5 years. 10-4 started out as a freight marketplace, and ended up pivoting a few times, landing on visibility. That was acquired by Trimble in 2017. That still at the time had TMW and PeopleNet and a few others. So we were brought into Trimble Transportation, as it's now known. That part of the organization was there until 2019. Met my partner, Johnny McCord. Johnny's got an interesting story. He was a Lloyds broker, London insurance broker for almost 20 years. Recognized the opportunity to serve the underserved, the SMBs, by Lloyds, but through automation and data. And so he had his idea, his concept, built a rough prototype, and realized he needed some freight and transportation expertise, supply chain expertise. we met through a mutual friend, and I joined Loadsure as employee number one, and we've been building it ever since. So it's coming up to 5 years now.
And so there was a lot there, and I have like a million questions just based on that background. But did you say that you were warehousing for the Mint, like the U.S. Mint?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting business. So the U.S. Mint ships in. It's an old building, right? It's I don't know, it goes back to the 1880s. So obviously didn't grow with the times. So they use third party warehouses to or at least one when I was there, to warehouse all the raw metal. So we would dray it from the railroad, or we had rail doors, the stuff that would come in via rail, or we'd pick up the containers from the rail yard, bring them back to the warehouse. We'd break the containers, warehouse the raw metal, and truck it down to the U.S. Mint when they needed it. So they would tell us we needed 2 dime, 3 nickel, penny, whatever the order was that day. We'd bring back all the scrap. So the easiest way to describe that, if you're making like Christmas cookies, or have ever seen them made, when you punch out the cookies, all the little scraps that are left, imagine that as coin, right? So they punch out the coins. All that scrap came back to us. We would reload containers, and then that would go back to the raw coin vendors for recycling, where the process would start all over again.
And so I imagine, what is security super tight on those kinds of loads? Maybe that's where like the insurance part of your career really started.
It's all pretty much done on the down low. Not much secure. There's like background checks and all of those sorts of things for anyone that is on Mint property. So that part was pretty strict, and we had pretty strict SOPs. But as far as security goes, because it's unminted coin,
True.
There wasn't much of a security requirement. There was one event. So everything came in these large rolls, right? So your nickel, your dime, your quarter, $50, dollars at the time, was very, very heavy, large rolls. Some of them were 8,000 kilograms. But the pennies came already blanked. So just imagine a penny without Abraham Lincoln's head on it, or anything on the back. At the time, I think it was the Lincoln Memorial. So it's just blanked, and we would take those from these large wooden boxes, dump them into these large blue funnel, for lack of a better term, that was on a stand, and they were very top heavy, because these things weighed roughly, I want to say 3,500 pounds each, and we'd load maybe 13, 14 of them on the truck and truck them down to the U.S. Mint. We had a driver one time. You had to go on an on-ramp that was a curve, a jug handle, and he was taking the curve a little too fast. He was still pretty green. The load shifted. The trailer flipped onto its side. Of course, the doors bust open, and there were penny blanks all over I-70. So needless to say, myself and a few other guys were shoveling pennies off of I-70 up until 2:00 in the morning, trying to find everyone that we could. You couldn't leave one behind.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a fun account, though. It was very, very interesting to get to see that side of it all.
That's crazy. So I would imagine, did you have to like fight people off that are, stopping on the side of the road and trying to get some blank pennies?
So the Denver police that were there, they were awesome. They kind of kept people away and were able to divert traffic pretty well. I did have some press come up and, just kind of explained to them. I said, look, I know you need to do your job, but any names you can keep out of that are going to be safer for everyone. And I managed to kind of keep the juicy bits out of the media at the time.
I imagine that is, especially with Denver, because I recently just went to Denver a few months ago, and you hear all the conspiracy theories of the blue horse that's outside of the Denver airport and things like that. Now I feel like this adds so much more to that intrigue of that city.
definitely. We definitely have our conspiracies for sure.
Okay, you get to the point in your career where you're a co-founder of Loadsure.
Yep.
What goes into being a co-founder of an insurance company?
Oh, we got a little lucky. I'm not going to say it was easy, but because Johnny's father was an insurance man as well. He actually owned a syndicate, or part of a syndicate that ended up getting sold to a major insurance company. So a lot of connections in London. He
Hmm.
knows a lot of people. That always helps, but it took a while. We started out with just getting Lloyd's paper, and then we've since branched from there, and we have some Lloyd's and non-Lloyd's capacity. We actually underwrite all our own risks and then lay that risk off to these insurers. But getting that Lloyd's cover holder status, it's not easy. It took almost a year, and I think we were the only company to actually get Lloyd's cover holder status in 2019.
And
At
when you say
least that's what I
Lloyd's,
understand.
is that like Lloyd's List? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Yeah, so Lloyd's, a lot of people think Lloyd's is an insurance company. It's not. Lloyd's is actually a marketplace in
Hmm.
London. It's the world's largest insurance marketplace. It was, oh God, 1680 is when it started.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually backed by several acts of UK Parliament, and there's a bankroll of security behind it. But Lloyd's is known for insuring odd things, right? So you hear about like Mick Jagger's lips and things like that it's insured, but they're typically very complex risks,
Hmm.
right? So if you ever get the opportunity to go to Lloyd's, and I highly recommend it, it's pretty neat. But it's a large building. It's actually inside out, so all of the plumbing and everything is outside of the building, and you can see it. It looks like that. It looks really odd, but it was designed that way so that if there is some maintenance requirements or something like that, the inside activity of the building isn't disturbed.
Smart.
And essentially, there's a bunch of boxes, and they're called boxes, where you have underwriters sitting in there, and you have brokers walking up to them with large files called slips, and they talk to the underwriter about the risk and get prices, and a lot of times they have to go to multiple underwriters, so 3, 4, 10, even more underwriters in order to cover a risk based on the size of the risk. So if they need 10 million or 20 million or hundreds of millions of dollars of cover, certain insurers may only take a piece of that.
Hmm.
And so they go around to all these different boxes, get it covered, and away they go. So it's pretty interesting to watch. But the marketplace is phenomenal. Every major insurer, has some sort of presence there or some
Hmm.
ties to it. That's just the way the market is, and I forget what the number is, but it's something like 80% of all global risks worldwide go through Lloyd's in some way, shape, or form. It's a massive industry.
And so you had mentioned that Loadsure was the first company to get a cover from Lloyd's, or I
No,
probably didn't phrase that correctly.
yeah, no, just in the year 2019, right, rolling up to COVID. Yeah, we were the best of my knowledge, we're the only company that got cover holder status that year.
And what does cover holder status mean?
So
That
cover
means that they're supplying it?
you have the right to transact with the marketplace
Oh,
and place
interesting.
risks with the marketplace. Yeah,
This
you
is so
still have
many
a
things I
broker.
didn't even know about the insurance market already. We're only 14 minutes into this conversation.
Yeah. Trust me, I'm still learning. I've been at this 5 years, and while some exposure to insurance, especially my last role with DHL. It's nothing like I have now, and I still have so much to learn.
I feel like that's the beauty of this industry, is that the more you learn, the more you realize how much there is still left to learn.
Yeah.
So this conversation is fantastic already. And one of the things that I did want to learn, and this is going to sound like such a dumb question, but I can't help but ask it. Typical, auto insurance, you pay for, a plan a year, and it's, sign it and forget it. You don't have to worry about it. But that's not the case in freight. Can you kind of break down, I guess, because I just assumed you paid for one plan a year in freight, and it covers you up to, a certain amount, and then you're good to go. But from looking at your website, there's various different kinds of plans, various different insurance coverages for different kinds of loads. Is that kind of a safe sort of overall of load? I know it's very simplification of Loadsure, but how does it generally work? Is it one plan? Is it several plans? Is it kind of a little bit of both?
Yeah, we have a few different products out there. Our first product that we started with was a very simple $100,000 worth of coverage for a load for $40. And we look to integrate that into any platform that would talk to us, load boards, TMSs, marketplaces, and anything that was out there. And as we grew as a company, as our platform grew, we expanded that to essentially dynamically priced up to 2 million globally, all modes, and that's our transactional product. We call that Thames after the river in London. All of our products are have a water name, and there's a methodology behind that. So rivers and waters that move, right, are transit related, and if lakes are stock related, right, but they're still all cargo, all supply chain coverage. But so that product is our transactional product, and then we have more of a pay as you go annual right-sized policy, right? So the Thames product is our out-of-the-box pricing. It's what you get from DAT or Trucker Tools or any number of platforms that we're integrated with. And then we have the ability to custom pricing, where we'll have a underwriter ask for your loss history and your volume, commodity mix, whether you have risk programs, what associations you belong to, a typical underwriting process. But they will go ahead and still break that down at a transactional level for you, and allow you to still buy that insurance on a pay-as-you-go basis. So we have that product, and we have some more traditional transit cargo insurance and stock throughput. So stock throughput is insuring product that is in transit and also in storage. So end-to-end supply chain coverage for your cargo. We do that, and we've recently been getting into motor carrier liability coverage, so cargo coverage, what's commonly referred to as MTC, and freight broker and freight forwarder legal liability coverage.
And how, I guess, I imagine that insurance coverage changes, from country to country. Is that a safe assumption? And how are they different if they do change from country to country?
Yeah, definitely.
I guess at a high level.
Laws and taxes and filing requirements, those sorts of things change. Some of the parlance changes. But for the most part, insurance is pretty consistent country to country. Lloyds has actually done a lot to standardize that. There's something called institute cargo clauses that sets up kind of a common wording for how refrigerated goods are insured, and general cargo is insured, and things like that. So there are standards out there that most of the industry uses, but yeah, you do tend to have to customize things, wording and disclosures and stuff like that based on the country and even the state.
Yeah, I imagine if you've been around since what did you say, the 1600s, that you probably figured out some procedures and standardization during that time frame. I would hope, at least. Now,
Absolutely.
I was watching one of your videos on YouTube, and there was a stat that said 60% of freight is either underinsured or not insured at all,
Hmm.
and essentially being called an underinsurance crisis. And so, with some of the things that you just mentioned there, I imagine that most freight companies have a standard plan, and then for specialty cargo or maybe high risk cargo, that's when the underinsurance, I guess, danger comes into play. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, it's the underinsurance crisis. It's really why Loadsure is in the market, and there's really three drivers behind that. One is education, right? So the fact that my carrier, be it a motor carrier or ocean carrier, has cargo insurance means I'm covered, and that's not the case. So carriers have what's commonly referred to as liability coverage, right? It's covering their liability in handling your cargo. So things that happen outside of that carrier's care and control aren't necessarily covered. Inside theft, double brokering, acts of God, right? Those sorts of things generally aren't covered. They insure the carrier, not the cargo owner. Um, the shipper's interest product that Loadsure offers is much broader coverage, right? So it covers acts of God, it covers theft. It's in the shipper's interest, or it's also called all risk. So it's a broader form coverage that covers those things, and it's more of a shipper or intermediary 3PL product. We do have carriers that do buy it, but for the most part, it's for shippers and cargo owners. So there is that gap. There's also things. There's a lot of commodities that carriers coverage doesn't cover. You hear a lot about exclusions, and there are a lot of common exclusions out there, and it seems to be getting more so every day. But things like electronics and alcohol and wood products and cotton and eggs, seafood, fresh berries. A lot of these things tend to be excluded. You read some of these lists that are out there, and you got to ask yourself, well, all right, well, what do you cover?
I was about to say that seems like a lot of things that should be covered, but maybe for other reasons. Food and bev, I think I read that, that fraud has affected food and bev disproportionately versus, I would think, electronics, for example, flat screen TVs or like PS5s or something like that would be, the hot button commodity that
Yeah.
thieves and, the bad actors are after. But it's food and bev is the number one because it's gone. You don't have a serial number on food and bev.
Yeah, exactly. Some of our biggest losses have been food and bev related. Yeah, it's a crazy world out there, and if you have any doubts if you're covered, you talk to your insurance broker. That's what they're there for. Make sure you're educated. Make sure you know what your carriers cover and what they don't. If you have them on a transportation agreement, make sure you've got very clear wording in there as far as what they're covering and what their insurance requirements are. But your insurance broker, that's your trusted intermediary. They're there to answer those questions and make sure you have the coverage that you need. So that's the education element. The other two things that contribute to that underinsurance crisis is really accessibility and price. So accessibility, typically, your traditional insurance broker, you call them up, you explain what you need. And if you're lucky, they'll get back to you in 24, 48 hours, right? Before companies like Loadsure came along, and we make it easy for that intermediary or you directly to go and get the coverage that you need. And we advertise 40 seconds, and I have gotten it done in less than 40 seconds.
Nice.
But if you're getting it through your integration through a TMS or something, you get it instantly, just by clicking a button. And that's all of that contributes to price, right? So we dynamically price our risks. We're always we look at all the attributes of the load, and then we're also looking at things like market conditions and the everything from weather and carrier performance and a myriad of other things to make sure that our prices are right priced and sustainable. We're not looking to undercut the market. We want to make sure that the risks are priced appropriately, but we also want to make sure that the insurance is attainable. There isn't this big swing in this soft market, hard market, right? Feast or famine sort of thing, right? And that's where dynamic pricing really comes in.
And what was the third one? So you said education, accessibility, and then is that pricing is the
Price.
third one?
Yes, ma'am. Price.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
So how, I guess, because you kind of brought it up, so I guess it's a good place to start with, sort of the fraud side of things. I mean, obviously it's been, it's always an important topic, but it feels like you can't, especially at the conferences that we've been to recently, that if fraud is just the dominant topic of choice among everyone, what is your kind of lay of the land of what companies should be paying attention to, and maybe some fraud that's under the radar a little bit that they should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. The double brokering, it's interesting. It's what you hear a lot about, and it seems to be hurting everyone. You have companies or bad actors out there sending carriers fraudulent rate cons, and you have carriers posing as other carriers, either buying an MC off of someone or posing as someone else to get the load and get an advance on the load, and yeah, it's chaos out there. There are a lot of tools out there that are coming on the market or recently on the market that are doing well to combat this, right? And insurance is one of them, obviously, but being able to get ahead of these things, the telematics devices that are out there by guys like Tive and Overhaul and those sorts of IoT devices that you can drop in a load. So incredibly hard to detect and find, but you're able to track that load in case a bad actor does get it and run off with it, right? And making sure you know who is picking up that load, guys like Highway that are out there, and there's a few others that are able to do that fraud detection. These are definitely important tools, but again, I go back to the talking to your insurance intermediary and making sure you're covered in these events around fraud. You get ahead of it with the tools that are out there, education, and then insurance for just in case, right?
And then because you had I'm curious as to with a lot of you mentioned something to the effect of you can quote a load or get covered in a load in under 40 seconds.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering if there are other, I guess, sort of variables when quoting a load that affect that it would almost turn into a situation where you got to talk to somebody to get it further like underwritten. Is it maybe like an expensive like seafood shipment or something like that would take a little bit longer? Are there like commodities or maybe lanes that are a little bit more of a higher focus than sort of, I guess, a run-of-the-mill load, if that exists?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our technology automatically underwrites anything under $750,000. For the most part, I think there might be a commodity or two that are lower than that, but the limit you can go up to in the portal is 2 million. So there's that gap between 750 and 2 million where an underwriter will want to look at it and make sure you have product handling in place, and if it's theft attractive, they'll want to ask you some SOP questions, but still pretty quick turnaround. We average there roughly 45 minutes in that
Oh, wow.
response. So still way lower than the 24, 48 hours that has historically been out there, right? Um, loads above 2 million, then we underwrite them outside of the portal. We still do them, but we'll want to take a deeper dive in that. There are other things outside, cross-border into Mexico. We do a lot of cross-border, but we're generally taking a little harder look at those to make sure that the logistics companies or shippers have the right security and procedures in place, and are doing the right things to make sure that the load doesn't get hijacked or otherwise stolen, right? Which is unfortunately a problem with the cross-border stuff right now.
And I would imagine for a lot of these shipments that, and a lot of these data points that you've been talking about, because I saw the word AI used on the site as far as determining what the cost of coverage will be and things like that. So I imagine those are all of the different data points that you're taking in and constantly learning and being able to quote these things more accurately in the future. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes, absolutely. We don't want to introduce a lot of friction in the front end to get a quote. So we require pretty minimal information. Your mode, origin, destination, the commodity, and your limit. And then as you'll get a quote right there, and then as you're going through and filling out the information to buy it, and there isn't a lot of information that we require, but we take that information and then that goes into a rating model with other information that we've gathered from third-party sources, so weather and hazard and traffic and lane and carrier performance and a myriad of other things, and the machine learning looks at that and it's as well as our own data, our claims data and everything else, and kind of creates this feedback loop to where we go back and update that initial rating model. That's essentially how it works, and that's how we're able to dynamically price risks.
So what happens, I guess, when the unfortunate does happen, when, maybe something is double brokered, maybe the freight is actually stolen. What happens during the claim process? If I'm, the driver or, the shipper of record, am I calling you first, or am I calling, law enforcement first? Like, what does that, I guess, process look like?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the circumstances. You definitely want to call law enforcement right away, right? Because that's your best chance at recovery. And then if you're using some sort of third party active risk management, if they aren't already aware of it, definitely make sure they're aware of it. From there, once the kind of dust is settled and you've reacted as they use the term in the industry, prudent uninsured. So you should always act as if you don't have insurance, right? To try and recover and take those steps to try and minimize the impact of a claim. Reasonably. I'm not telling you to go after a thief and put yourself in harm's way or anything like that. But you should always act as that prudent uninsured. We ourselves have a link on the certificate you can access through the portal. We even have a QR code on the certificate you can scan with your mobile phone. It will automatically pull in information from the certificate. It asks you for a couple questions around cause of loss. You'll upload some documentation, so your commercial invoice, packing list, bill of lading, maybe photos if there's damage or something like that. And then we have some optical character recognition, OCR, on the back end that will validate those documents, pull some information out, feed that into a decision management engine with the information you provided around the cause of loss and the information from the certificate. And while it's still learning, the system has settled claims in under 10 seconds.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it has been a lot of fun to build, and we're really only getting started. So
I was about to say, I mean, from the quoting under 40 seconds, and then you're able to settle a claim, so quickly. It sounds like you have a really lean and agile operation.
we do, absolutely. Yeah, and you need that agility to be able to respond to our customers, and continue to build a I like to say elegant, human centric product. So yeah.
What about from, I guess, I'm not sure if you can talk about this, but any of the like crazy insurance claims or anything like that? Is it any weird freight or interesting and insurance stories you can tell us?
Ooh, one of my colleagues, Taylor Walker, he's our chief insurance officer. He's got a lot of great stories. We've had claims where someone went to go take a shower at a truck stop, and came out, and the truck was gone, and the keys were, I don't know if conveniently or what, it left in the ignition, but we've paid the claim. Definitely, actually, one of our first major claims was some televisions that were double stacked without really being lashed or tied in there, and there was four different parties involved. There was the freight broker, there was the buyer, there was the seller, and then there was another warehouse, third party warehouse involved in it. That was a mess to get through, and we still resolved that claim. I think it was only 12 days. Which just deciding who actually owned the cargo at that time
Wow.
was half the battle. Yeah, the claims can be fun and interesting, for sure, and that's where the technology and the data really come into play to help cut through that, and really cut down the time, so people aren't waiting 30, 60, 90, 120 days to resolve a claim. It should never take that long.
Especially for some companies, especially when you're, kind of the cash flow is a little, troubled at this time. So maybe you need, some of that money a little bit sooner than waiting that, typical insurance claim time.
No doubt.
Going back to, your LinkedIn, I saw that you took a ride in one of the Waymo cars, that one of the robo taxis. I'm curious
Yes.
how do you think insurance is thinking about coverage for autonomous vehicles?
I thought about that a lot after that ride. Yeah, it's very interesting if something happens. You know, if you're driving, or I'm driving down the road, and God forbid I hit somebody, right? I'm the one who's responsible. I'm culpable. It's my fault, and my insurance handles that, right? That's been clear for the last 100 years, since people have been driving cars, and having car insurance. Yeah, a robo taxi hitting someone, right? Who's culpable? Is it the developers, the company? Yeah, I suppose it is, but it's not really as clean, right?
Hmm.
As far as getting back to how all that handles, and I think regulation is going to have to do a lot to kind of keep up with these things. But I'll tell you what, that taxi ride was just incredible. Yeah, if your subscribers haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. And I think they're running in Phoenix and San Francisco right now. But I felt 100% safe in it. There
Really?
was even one part I think I had in that video where an ambulance is approaching an intersection, and the light turns green for me, but the car still stayed and waited for the ambulance to go by. It was very impressive. Drove very human like. It wasn't very juddering about or anything like that. It was very clean and speedy, and yeah, it definitely made me feel like that's the way the future is going. So yeah, and insurance and regulations will have to keep up, because I don't think that's going to be stopped. I think it's how it's all going to be.
Yeah, I think I've said for a while now that I think we're going to look back in, 40 or 50 years, we're going to look back on people driving cars and think, how the heck did we allow this to happen where so many idiots are allowed to control, behind, 15,000 pounds or whatever, however much a car weighs or a truck weighs,
Yeah.
to allow them behind the wheel and just drive crazy. So I do think I agree with you, even though, I know some drivers are going to have some words to say about that. But for the everyday people, I think that it's probably best that we leave, driving the big semi trucks up to the experts, the veteran drivers, and then, maybe some of the people can be replaced by the robots. That
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that would definitely make people feel safer.
I think it'll be a slow process. It's one thing driving, a little Jaguar crossover that Waymo has, to compared to an 80,000 pound rig, going 75 down the road, right? That could do a lot of damage if something goes wrong. So yeah, I feel much better having humans drive those, at least for right now, right?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, to your point, 30, 40, 50 years in the future. But yeah, it's not quite apples to apples, but it was a very interesting demonstration of the technology. I think.
And so, with speaking of technology, you Loadsure and you guys are I feel like at every conference, and so with being at all of the conferences this year, have you seen any technology, any advancements, improvements within the industry that really strike you as something that you want to be paying attention to?
There's been this kind of overall trend over the last 10 years. You had the concept of the digital brokerage, right? That was going to replace freight brokers.
R.I.P. Convoy.
And yeah, we all know that didn't quite happen. Uh, Now it's more moving towards really assisting brokers and shippers and carriers, for that matter, make their lives better, improve their productivity, and increase the volume that they can do, right. And I think that's where the industry needs to continue, is get our transportation facilities more efficient, whether it's automation warehouses, or helping with dispatch, and being prescriptive, and adding AI to help with risk, if loads are running late or in jeopardy, and how you respond to those things, how you respond to carrier capacity issues, and those sorts of things. I think that's where technology is really is going to make all of those processes more efficient, or even eliminate the risks associated with them, right?
Yeah, for sure. I agree, because there's so much emphasis, I think, played on a lot of these digital freight brokerages, replacing the broker. And now we've learned, or some of these companies have learned the hard way, that it's about your people and your relationships, and then using technology to enhance that. And so
Yep.
I still think, hearing everything that you've talked about on the insurance side of things, there's definitely some of those same, philosophies and processes that can be applied to freight as well. And I think it kind of forced a lot of these brokerages to adopt technology faster, which is a good thing. And, I guess depending on who you ask, is a good thing. I'm curious, as we kind of round out with the interview, are there ways that companies can be paying attention to when it comes to insurance to save money on their premiums? Or is it, I've heard of companies, BCB Transport is one of them in particular, that, they very much preach a safety-driven culture.
Mhm.
Is that still possible to preach, safety-driven, or be highly focused on safety? Or maybe there's other ways to save money on insurance?
Absolutely. Yeah, as far as the auto and general liability, I'm not an expert in those areas, but have seen the impact that vehicle telematics and cameras, inward facing and outward facing cameras, have done to really save a lot of trucking companies out there from really significant claims. Right, your drivers are the experts. They're the experienced ones out there, but having that backup, so it's not a he said she said scenario in the event of an incident, is incredibly valuable. And definitely investing in your drivers as far as training and education. That's very important as well. For shippers and brokers, knowing what your coverage is, knowing what exclusions are, and engaging with your insurance broker, or feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to help you do coverage review, look at where potential gaps might be, and where you can save money. So you're not paying twice for insurance that you don't need, or there aren't any holes in your coverage that could be a significant risk for you.
Yeah, I that's such a great point to make, because I think you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you learn these lessons the hard way. So why not be a little, it's getting close to the end of the year, so why not be a little proactive and have, somebody who's experienced take a look at these things and just make sure that you are, crossing your T's and dotting the I's.
Absolutely.
So Jim, what else can we expect from, I guess, from Loadsure? What does the product roadmap, I guess, look like for in the near future that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Loadsure is all about holistic freight protection, and we have a number of more risk management products coming down the pike. So insurance is part of a risk management suite of products, and a risk management strategy. But it's risk transfer, right? The idea really is to get ahead of the risk and of the potential incident happening in the first place. And so we have a number of partnerships and a number of our own technologies that we're developing and rolling out that are going to help our small, medium-sized businesses and even enterprise customers better manage their risk. You shouldn't have to be an S&P 500 company to have a comprehensive risk management program, and we want to make that attainable for everyone.
I think the tagline from the website, the future of freight insurance, is a perfect, sort of synopsis of what you guys are doing. I've been a big fan of Loadsure for a while, so I'm happy that we finally got to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Jim, where can folks, follow more of you, your work, check out your robo-taxi photos and videos on LinkedIn, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So Loadsure is loadsure.net. If you go to the About Us page, you'll find myself and my colleagues on there, and our LinkedIn's on there. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. It's just Jim Heide, Heide, and at Loadsure, and I'll come up. Feel free to connect with me, and let's have a conversation.
Heck yeah. And especially, review those insurance premiums and those insurance bills, and have Loadsure help you out with that. So Jim, appreciate your time today. I'll be sure to list all of that in the show notes just to make it easy for folks. But thank you again for coming on the show. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Blythe. This was great. Really appreciate it.